Imagine building a life in a new country, only to be told you must leave. In 2025, several European nations are tightening their borders, and for thousands, deportation is becoming a harsh reality. Why is this happening, and which countries are taking the toughest stance? Let's break it down. Let's talk about Germany. Germany has long been a beacon for immigrants, welcoming millions since the 2015 migrant crisis. But in 2025, the political winds are shifting dramatically. The rise of right-wing parties like the Alternative for Germany, AfD, has put immense pressure on the coalition government, now leaning towards stricter immigration controls. Economic strain is a major driver. Germany faces a housing crisis, with skyrocketing rents in cities like Berlin and Munich, and public services are stretched thin. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has emphasized, "We must prioritize integration and security," reflecting a broader sentiment that resources must be reserved for citizens. New deportation laws target those with rejected asylum claims or criminal records, even for minor offenses like shoplifting. This marks a departure from Germany's historically lenient approach, as appeal processes are shortened, and bilateral agreements with countries like Syria and Nigeria streamline removals. Critics warn that families who've built lives in Germany for years, paying taxes, attending schools, are being uprooted, risking humanitarian crises. For instance, in Bavaria, local protests have highlighted cases of long-term residents facing deportation over technicalities. Yet, with unemployment creeping up in manufacturing sectors, the government argues these measures protect jobs for Germans. The social fabric is also under strain, with eastern states reporting rising anti-immigrant sentiment, while urban areas like Hamburg remain more inclusive. Germany's deportation surge includes high-profile operations, like dawn raids in immigrant-heavy neighborhoods, sparking heated debates on social media. Human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, have called the policies a betrayal of Germany's humanitarian legacy, while supporters see them as a necessary recalibration. Will Germany find a balance, or will its reputation as a welcoming nation fade in the face of these tough choices? Let's talk about France. France's approach to immigration has always been a delicate dance, but 2025 marks a decisive shift toward enforcement. President Emmanuel Macron, under pressure from Marine Le Pen's national rally, has adopted policies to curb illegal immigration and appease a restless electorate. New legislation fast-tracks deportations for undocumented migrants, and even legal residents face scrutiny if they have relied on social benefits for extended periods. The government cites terrorism concerns, pointing to recent attacks in Paris, and the strain on public resources like healthcare and housing as key drivers. In suburbs like Seine-Saint-Denis, where immigrant communities are prominent, tensions are palpable, with protests erupting over family separations. For example, a viral video of a Malian family being detained sparked nationwide outrage, yet polls show 60% of French voters support stricter measures. France's labor shortages in agriculture and healthcare add complexity. Farmers in Provence rely on migrant workers, yet deportations continue unabated. The government's security-first rhetoric has led to controversial measures, like increased police powers to conduct identity checks, often criticized as racial profiling. Deportation centers near Calais are at capacity, and agreements with countries like Algeria expedite removals. Meanwhile, cultural debates rage. Le Pen's calls for French identity resonate in rural areas, while urban Parisians advocate for inclusivity. France's policies reflect a nation at a crossroads, torn between its republican ideals of liberty and the practical demands of governance. The human cost is undeniable, with NGOs reporting cases of children left in limbo as parents are deported. Can France reconcile its global image with domestic pressures? Let's talk about Italy. Italy, with its sun-soaked coasts and storied history, has been a migrant gateway for decades, but in 2025, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's far-right government is slamming the door shut. Meloni's coalition, rooted in the Brothers of Italy party, has made immigration control a cornerstone, capitalizing on public frustration over boat arrivals from North Africa. In 2025, Italy is accelerating deportations, targeting those who arrive irregularly or have criminal records. New naval blockades in the Mediterranean, coupled with controversial agreements with Libya, to detain migrants before they reach Italian shores, aim to curb inflows. Meloni argues, our social welfare system cannot sustain uncontrolled migration, pointing to Italy's high youth unemployment rate of 20% and strained public services. Yet, Italy's aging population, projected to shrink by 10% by 2050, relies on young workers, many of whom are immigrants. Economists warn that mass deportations could cripple sectors like agriculture and caregiving. In Sicily, where migrant arrivals are highest, social tensions flare, with locals divided between compassion and resentment. Stories of detained children in overcrowded camps near Lampedusa have sparked outrage from human rights groups like Médecins Sans Frontières, yet Meloni's base cheers the crackdown. Deportation processes are now streamlined, with fast-track hearings and minimal appeals, raising concerns about due process. Italy's policies are a high-stakes gamble, balancing security and economic needs while navigating global scrutiny. The nation's heart, torn between hospitality and self-preservation, beats loudly in 2025. Let's talk about Sweden. Sweden was once Europe's gold standard for asylum policies, welcoming more refugees per capita than any other nation during the 2015 crisis. But in 2025, the tide has turned. Rising gang violence in immigrant-heavy neighborhoods, like Rinkeby in Stockholm, has fueled a zero-tolerance stance. The center-right government, backed by the Sweden Democrats, is deporting not only criminals, but also those who fail stringent language or employment requirements. The message is stark: integrate or leave. Supporters argue this protects social cohesion, pointing to overcrowded schools and a housing shortage that leaves 700,000 people on waiting lists. Yet, opponents call it a betrayal of Sweden's humanitarian roots, with some comparing it to Denmark's hardline pivot. In 2025, Sweden's deportation system is ruthlessly efficient. Voluntary return programs offer financial incentives, while forced removals are swift. For example, a Somali family in Malmö made headlines after being deported despite living in Sweden for a decade, prompting protests. The government insists these measures are temporary, but for immigrants, the impact is permanent. Social media amplifies the divide, with hashtags like #Sweden. For Swedes trending alongside #refugees, welcome. Economically, Sweden's tech sector, reliant on skilled migrants, fears a brain drain, yet public sentiment prioritizes short-term relief. Sweden's journey from open arms to closed borders is a cautionary tale of idealism meeting reality. Let's talk about Denmark. Denmark's immigration policies have been Europe's toughest for years, and in 2025, they're doubling down. The Social Democratic government, despite its progressive roots, has embraced hardline measures, including the infamous ghetto laws that designate immigrant-heavy neighborhoods as high-risk zones. These areas face deportation sweeps, targeting those with criminal convictions, even for petty theft or rejected asylum claims. Denmark's goal is social harmony, with Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen stating, "We must preserve our values." Critics argue the laws disproportionately target Muslim communities, citing cases where entire families were evicted from Copenhagen's Mjølnerparken district. Public support for multiculturalism has waned, with polls showing 65% of Danes favor stricter policies. Denmark's deportation system is a well-oiled machine, with detention centers and agreements with countries like Iraq ensuring rapid removals. Yet, the human toll is stark. NGOs report rising mental health issues among detained migrants. Economically, Denmark's low unemployment rate masks labor shortages in construction and healthcare, where immigrants play a key role. The paradox is clear. Denmark wants fewer immigrants but needs their contributions. Globally, Denmark's reputation as a progressive leader is fading, replaced by a pragmatic, insular stance. The question lingers: can Denmark maintain its social model while closing its heart? Let's talk about Austria. Austria's conservative Green coalition, led by Chancellor Karl Nehammer, has taken a surprising turn in 2025, backing deportation rules that rival Europe's strictest. The government argues that Austria must protect its cultural identity, a sentiment echoing the rise of the Freedom Party. New laws require immigrants to prove financial self-sufficiency within 6 months or face removal, even for skilled workers who lose jobs unexpectedly. In Vienna, protests have erupted, with activists accusing the government of scapegoating immigrants for economic woes like rising inflation, which hit 7% in 2024. Yet, with living costs soaring, the policy enjoys significant public backing, particularly in rural areas. Austria's deportation process is methodical, with streamlined hearings and detention facilities near borders. For instance, a Pakistani engineer in Salzburg was deported after losing his job, despite years of tax contributions, sparking debate about fairness. Social tensions are high, with far-right groups amplifying anti-immigrant rhetoric online. Austria's economy, heavily reliant on tourism and manufacturing, faces risks from labor shortages, yet the government prioritizes short-term political gains. The Green Coalition partners, once advocates for inclusivity, now face criticism for compromising their values. Austria's dilemma mirrors Europe's broader struggle, how to remain open yet secure in a polarized era. Let's talk about Switzerland. Switzerland, a non-EU nation, is aligning with Europe's hardening stance in 2025. The Swiss People's Party, a dominant political force, has pushed for quotas on non-EU migrants, and even long-term residents face stricter citizenship tests. Deportations have surged for those relying on social aid, with officials stating, Switzerland is not a welfare state for foreigners. In Geneva, where 40% of residents are foreign-born, the policy has sparked backlash from businesses in pharmaceuticals and hospitality, which rely on migrant labor. For example, a Filipino nurse was deported after a temporary unemployment stint, despite years of service in a Zurich hospital. Switzerland's deportation system is precise, with voluntary return programs and bilateral agreements ensuring efficiency. Yet, public sentiment, particularly in German-speaking cantons, supports the crackdown, with 55% of voters favoring tighter borders in recent referendums. Social media campaigns highlight stories of deported families, raising ethical questions. Switzerland's prosperity, built on global talent, is at odds with its insular politics. Will pragmatism prevail, or will Switzerland's economy suffer from its own policies? Let's talk about Belgium. Belgium's fractured government, split across linguistic and political lines, has struggled to unify on immigration. But 2025 brings a rare consensus: enforcement. Asylum seekers with rejected claims face faster deportations, and even recognized refugees must meet stringent integration benchmarks, like language fluency and employment. Prime Minister Alexander De Croo calls it fair but firm, but NGOs report chaotic raids in Brussels with families torn apart. For instance, a Congolese refugee family was deported despite appeals, sparking outrage from human rights groups. Belgium's role as the EU's political hub adds scrutiny. Its policies could influence broader European trends. Economically, Belgium's ports and logistics sectors rely on immigrant workers, yet public frustration over housing shortages fuels anti-immigrant sentiment. Deportation centers near Antwerp are overcrowded, and agreements with countries like Morocco expedite removals. Social tensions, particularly in Flemish regions, are high, with far-right parties gaining ground. Belgium's challenge is to maintain its cosmopolitan identity while addressing domestic unrest, a delicate balance with far-reaching implications. Let's talk about the Netherlands. The Netherlands, once a beacon of tolerance, is now prioritizing controlled migration in 2025. Geert Wilders' far-right influence has pushed the government to cap refugee intakes and deport those who fail to adopt Dutch norms like language proficiency or civic participation. Controversially, some dual nationals have lost citizenship for disloyalty, such as joining foreign organizations deemed radical. In Rotterdam, where 50% of residents have migrant backgrounds, the policy has sparked protests, with activists arguing it undermines Dutch liberalism. Yet, polls show 60% of voters support the measures, citing overcrowded schools and healthcare systems. The Netherlands' deportation process is efficient, with detention facilities and voluntary return incentives. For example, A Moroccan-Dutch citizen lost citizenship over alleged extremist ties, despite no criminal charges, raising ethical concerns. Economically, the Netherlands' tech and agriculture sectors rely on migrants, yet the government prioritizes public sentiment. The nation's liberal ideals are being tested. Can it remain a global leader in openness while closing its doors? Let's talk about Norway. Norway, with its stunning fjords and oil-driven prosperity, has shocked many in 2025 by adopting conservative deportation policies. The center-left government, facing pressure from the right-wing Progress Party, has embraced a Norwegians first mantra. Immigrants failing to secure jobs within a year face deportation, and language requirements are stricter than ever. In Oslo, where 30% of residents are immigrants, the policy has sparked debate, with businesses warning of labor shortages in healthcare and construction. For instance, a Assyrian refugee was deported after struggling to find work, despite completing language courses, highlighting the policy's rigidity. Norway's deportation system is streamlined, with agreements ensuring swift returns to countries like Somalia. Public support is strong, with 58% of Norwegians favoring tighter borders, according to recent polls. Yet, NGOs report rising despair among immigrant communities, with mental health services overwhelmed. Norway's shift, despite its wealth, signals a broader European trend. Prosperity doesn't guarantee openness. The Arctic nation's policies reflect a growing insularity, challenging its humanitarian legacy. Deportation isn't just policy, it's people's lives. As Europe's landscape changes in 2025, the struggle between security and humanity continues. Stay informed, stay compassionate. If you found this video eye-opening, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more breakdowns on global travel, visa bans, and what's really happening around the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.